Hello everyone and welcome to another video. I recently made a video about a 2-in-1 Dell with a Ryzen 7 4700U processor. This time, I have a much cheaper alternative from Lenovo. This specific version sells for 700 Canadian dollars and there's an improved version for 600 US dollars. We'll talk more about the differences just in a moment. Despite its low price, it is a 6-core, 6-thread Ryzen 5 4500U processor. It has a base clock of 2.3 GHz, a boost clock of 4.1 GHz, and a total of 11 MB of cache. Before we have a look at the rest of the specs, please consider subscribing to my channel so I can make more videos. It has 8 GB of RAM in total, and 4 GB are on the motherboard while the other 4 is on a SODIMM stick. As the soldered RAM runs at 2666 MHz, even if you get a faster SODIMM stick, it'll still run at 2666. It also has 256 GB of NVMe SSD, Wi-Fi 5, and Bluetooth 5.0. It also has a 0.3 megapixel webcam with a privacy cover and a dual microphone setup. It has a 15.6-inch 1080p TN panel with a brightness of 220 nits and a 45 Wh battery. The US version, on the other hand, has 8 GB of soldered RAM with no information about a SODIMM slot. It also has a 512 GB SSD, a slightly better 250 nit screen, a 720p camera, Wi-Fi 6, and a 57 Wh battery. The Canadian version doesn't have a backlit keyboard, while the US version does. As I mentioned earlier, it sells for 700 Canadian dollars, which is pretty much the same price as laptops with 10th Gen i5 processors. I'll also compare them with the Ryzen 7 4700U, the processor in my Dell 2-in-1. In terms of ports, there is a barrel-type charging plug, 2 USB 3.2 Gen 1 ports, 1 USB 2.0 port for some reason, 1 HDMI port, 1 3.5mm headphone microphone combo jack, and an SD card reader. I'd like to have a USB-C port, and I don't know why they included a USB 2 port in 2020. At 2.2 kilograms, it's not the lightest laptop ever, but it's not heavier than our similarly priced computers. If you ask someone what a laptop looks like, this is what you would get as a response. This is a no-surprise laptop. Everything is where they're supposed to be without any gimmicks. The build quality is decent. Basically, the places you touch frequently are metal, while the rest is plastic. The hinges could be sturdier, and there's a significant screen flex. You can't open the lid with one hand, as the lid is very light. One annoying thing is the bottom corners. They feel quite sharp as 2 plastic pieces join there for some reason. I have mixed feelings about this keyboard. First things first, it's not backlit, which could be a deal breaker for some people. Also, this laptop has the Canadian multilingual layout, which takes some time to get used to. Otherwise, aside from a rather narrow numpad, it feels like a decent keyboard. The keys are quite large, which makes it quite comfortable to type on it. On the other hand, as there is very little space in between keys, it's very easy to make mistakes. There is some keyboard flex, but it could be worse. Quick note, you can tell they really did their best to populate all the multimedia keys. The multimedia function for F5 is refresh. The function for F7 is airplane mode, and the function for F8 is to disable the camera. That's my favorite because this laptop has a privacy shutter, and the reason why we have privacy shutters is that we didn't trust the software blockers in the first place. The touchpad is smaller than I'd like it to be, but otherwise, it's perfect. It's a precision touchpad and it's very easy to click on it. Unlike the Dell I made a video about, you can click on it pretty high up. This unit doesn't support Wi-Fi 6, but the reception is better than any other computer I own. This is actually very impressive, and you can upgrade to Wi-Fi 6 by getting an M.2 Wi-Fi card from Amazon. As I mentioned earlier, it is a 15.6-inch 1080p screen and it's a TN panel. The viewing angles are bad, both horizontally and vertically. Also, as it has a peak brightness of 220 nits, using it outside is out of the question, and even inside, if you're in a well-lit room, you'll need to find a good viewing angle. This also means that you'll have the brightness set at 100% pretty much all the time, and we'll see how much of an effect it has on the battery life. With 45% of the NTSC color gamut, you will want to get an external monitor if you're doing photo editing. It has narrow bezels on sides, but the top and bottom bezels are quite thick. It has a 0.3 megapixel camera and a dual microphone setup. At a resolution of 640 by 480, the quality leaves a lot to be desired. It has 2 microphones and the sound quality is great. But I feel like I have to say this. Lenovo, if you're gonna include such a bad webcam, you might just as well not include one. This isn't usable for Skype or Zoom calls anyway. It has 2 bottom firing speakers. It lacks some bass, but otherwise the sound quality is decent. They go reasonably loud and you won't have any problems as long as the source volume isn't low. And with this, let's start benchmarking. Let's start with CINEBENCH. Unsurprisingly, we see that the 4500U pretty much matches the 10th Gen i5s in single-core CINEBENCH and surpasses them by 31 to 57% in multi-core. And this is despite the Intel's having 8 threads compared to Ryzen's 6. Moreover, We also see the huge performance increase between Ryzen 3000 and Ryzen 4000. With CINEBENCH out of the way, let's move to PCMARK 10. Here, we see that the 10210 is the better performer of the Intels, but the 4500U performs around 6% better. We then used HANDBRAKE to convert a 1200 MB 4K 30fps video to a 1080p MKV using the YouTube preset. HANDBRAKE can take advantage of multiple threads, and as a result, while we see that the 4500 is performing better than the i5s, the difference is less than 10%. The reason for this is that while the 4500U has more cores, the i5s have more threads. We can see the performance difference between Zen Plus and Zen 2 here as well. Exporting in Premiere is a demanding task for both the CPU and the GPU, so let's check that out. On my SSD, I have an 8-minute 4K video with plenty of effects, so let's check the export performance. Here, we see that the results are very close to one another, with the exception of the 4700U performing much better and the 3700U performing much worse. Before we start gaming, let's check 3DMark. In both physics and graphics, our 4500U performs better than the Intels. The difference is around 19% in physics and anywhere between 57 to 150% in graphics. Speaking of graphics, our i5-8265U and the 10210U have the UHD 620 chip, while the 1035 G1 has the new UHD G1 chip. The G1 performs significantly better than the UHD 620, but it still falls behind the AMD integrated graphics. Our Lenovo is definitely not a gaming computer, but it doesn't mean that you can't do some light gaming every now and then. This Lenovo, by default, comes with a dual channel RAM, so I won't be comparing the performance between single channel and dual channel. If you're interested in that, you should check my other video about the Dell Inspiron with Ryzen 7 4700U CPU. In all of our games, we see that the Lenovo with the 4500U is performing anywhere between 33 to 90% better than our Intel laptops. As I mentioned in my Dell video, AMD is proud of the integrated graphics units on their Ryzen mobile chips, and I understand why. You will definitely be able to play some games between your classes or when you're bored at the library. We also see that while the 10nm Intel processors have better integrated graphics units, they still fall behind the Ryzens. At 45 Wh, it doesn't have a super large battery. I don't have access to PCMARK 10 battery nor MobileMark, so I had to come up with my own tests. I tested the battery life on my Dell this way, and I'll use the same test on this one as well. With all this, the Lenovo lasted 4 hours and 46 minutes. I did a second test with a single Skype call and no video editing, and I got 7 hours and 10 minutes. In the second test, it lasted 18 minutes longer than my Dell, which isn't surprising as it has a 10% bigger battery. The 4500U on this laptop idles around 45 degrees. You can't hear the fans at all when the computer is idling. Under an all-core load, the CPU quickly boosts up to 3.5 GHz and stays there for 10 seconds, but then it eventually settles at 3.2 GHz. Under an 8064 stress test, it took around 5 minutes before the fan started spinning at full speed. It reaches a maximum of 75 degrees, which is pretty good for a laptop. The area near the fan exhaust and the left side of the keyboard get quite warm. As I mentioned earlier, similarly priced laptops have 8th or 10th Gen i5s or 3rd Gen Ryzen 7s, and this laptop outperforms all of them in both CPU and graphics intensive scenarios. The 4500U is more on par with the i7-10510U. The more impressive part is the price difference. Let's check prices of similar computers except the processor. Here, we see that our laptop costs just as much as the laptops we compared it to. At the time of filming, the cheapest laptop with the i7-10510U costs around $1,100 Canadian dollars. Is this laptop perfect? Not at all. It needs a better screen and a better webcam for sure. But otherwise, it's a pretty decent laptop with a great processor and thermals. And for $700 Canadian dollars, it's a steal. Overall, despite all the shortcomings, laptops like this are very important to AMD as they will gain a customer base. Thank you so much for watching. Please consider liking this video, checking out my other videos, and subscribing to my channel. Take care.